Every so often, we get a real movie that comes out and is deemed as must-see in theaters. In fact, in this year, the year of our Lord, 2023, we're getting 3. Amongst the torrent of lackluster superhero films, race-swap nostalgia bait, and unnecessary sequels, some movies and filmmakers have decided to stand apart from the crowd and dare to be different. And leading that charge is Christopher Nolan. Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and today we're going to talk about Oppenheimer. Spoiler-free, of course. This new movie from Christopher Nolan is about the life and times of J. Robert Oppenheimer, and the film goes out of its way to say the J stands for nothing, but I call bogus. The J clearly stands for JoJo, because this film is a bizarre adventure, and I mean that in all the best ways. Grace Randolph stated that this was not a good film for IMAX, but Grace Randolph has also said that Star Wars Rebels was the single greatest Star Wars content of all time, so we may want to grain of salt it when it comes to Gracie. I saw this movie in IMAX, and visually, she may be correct. It does not necessarily warrant an IMAX from a visual perspective, but this movie is not just a visual film. In fact, more so, it is an auditory film, and the IMAX was the perfect way to experience Oppenheimer on an auditory level. The sound design is like freshly grated Parmesan cheese baked and broiled over a cut of salmon. Perfect. There are so many sound effects, from the whirring of atoms to the white noise of Oppenheimer's inner thoughts, the explosion of a nuclear bomb, and even the fuzziest grain of 1940s radios, all accentuated with the unparalleled IMAX surround sound. And this movie's going to get nominated for several Oscars, I'm sure, but the one it undoubtedly should win and probably will win is Best Sound Editing. It's not just the sound design though, the score is mesmerizing. Film's composer Ludwig Göransson, yeah, a film composer named Ludwig, go figure, he's known for composing music for films like Venom, Black Panther, and Creed. Black Panther, which I believe he won an Oscar for, but this is unquestionably his best work. He's also kind of an odd choice. Far from the bombastic scores of Hans Zimmer, who usually works with Nolan, Göransson brings an element of emotional detachment during the scenes that call for it, and unrivaled exploration of thought in other scenes. The dude is far more talented than I've initially given him credit for, given his prior work with overinflated, same-sounding Disney tunes. Now, of course, there is an elephant in the room we need to address, and no, it's not Lizzo, it's the runtime, although that is probably the first time Lizzo and Run have ever been used together in the same sentence. Either way, 3 hours seems like a tall order. Give me a movie that isn't Lord of the Rings or a Kurosawa film that has a 3-hour runtime and doesn't raise eyebrows. I can happily say this movie does not feel like 3 hours. The pacing is spectacular, and I fully expected the flick to end not too long after the bomb goes off. For most storytellers, that would be a natural part to end the story, right? Well, wrong, bucko. You have a whole nother hour left, and it is, and I cannot stress this enough, the best hour of the film. At the showing I attended, 3 rows in front of me were a group of teenagers. They couldn't have been older than 16, and frankly, I'd peg them for about 14 to 15 if I had to make an educated guess. If you told me a gaggle of teenage boys would be on the edge of their seat for what is effectively a courtroom drama, I'd have laughed in your faces if I was at a Dave Chappelle show. But here I stand, or sit, I guess, humbled. This movie had everyone in the theater captivated for 3 whole hours, and not a single minute of screen time was wasted. Usually you can say about a film, oh, they could have cut it down by about 20 minutes, or these few scenes went on a few minutes too long, but not here. This movie earned every single second of its 10,800 seconds. But we all know why you're here. It's a Nolan film. You're here for the characters, and this film has more characters than Hunter Biden has sex tapes. From acclaimed actors like Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, and Rami Malek to some that I was surprised I did not loathe just seeing on screen, like Josh Peck, the absolute show stealers are actually Matt Damon and Cillian Murphy. I mean, of course, Cillian. By the way, that is how you pronounce it, not Cillian. It goes without saying that Cillian Murphy is one of the most underrated stars in Hollywood. The man just disappears into his roles like Joel Osteen disappears from his followers during a hurricane. Like look at his filmography and ask yourself how many of these movies you either forgot or straight up didn't realize he was in. Truly a master of his craft. I didn't feel like I was watching Cillian Murphy playing J. Robert Oppenheimer. I felt like I was watching the J. Robert Oppenheimer, and his introduction into the film is mind-melting, treating him almost like an ethereal being even in his college years, while later on showing the man as deeply flawed. If you ever saw The Theory of Everything, the Stephen Hawking biopic, I wish that movie was what this movie is. Rather than aggrandizing Oppenheimer as some flawless, godlike figure, they toe a fine line between making sure you like watching him but acknowledge he can be arrogant, adulterous, hubris-filled, kind of a piece of shit that at the end of the day is still a good man at heart. And when you watch the few scenes where Oppenheimer is teaching, they are magnetic. which kind of takes me back to Stephen Hawking since he was the one that was obsessed with magnets, but you get my point. All that being said, though, Matt Damon is the real surprise in this movie. I mean, no one would ever say he's a bad actor. Far from it. He is supremely talented. But if you told me he'd be able to hold his own for about 60% of a movie alongside Cillian Murphy as a friend, rival, confidant, and source of his woes, all in a historical drama, while adding the best subtle humor to the film and arguably the most gut-punching line in the film, I just said you were Good Will Hunting. But it's true, and these two have the best on-screen chemistry I've seen in probably the last half-decade. This is not recency bias talking. I genuinely think this might be the best on-screen chemistry I've seen in 5 years. From their first scene together, you are going to be hooked and wonder where is their relationship going to go from here, because let me tell you, it could go a myriad of different ways. But not only that, Matt Damon is who truly grounds this movie. He's not a scientist, he's not a politician, he's a general in the army, a real person, and his undying loyalty to his country, while also an unwavering trust in Oppenheimer, even when they butt heads, is the true humanity of this movie. And like I mentioned before, he's humorous. This is by no means a comedy film, but Nolan and Damon were both smart enough to recognize that if you're going to spend 3 hours making a movie about the man that bombed the ability to drive out of the Asian world, you should probably throw in some moments of levity. Don't feel too bad for Japan, though. They gave us Godzilla because of those nukes, so next time you're watching a kaiju film and you're really getting into it and enjoying it, maybe say a quick thanks to your boy Oppenheimer, because we wouldn't even have Godzilla if not for that man. The film also isn't quite told in chronological order. In fact, there's 3 timelines going on, and while I won't explain them for spoiler reasons, I will say the portion of the film shot in black and white to represent 50s America at the height of McCarthyism was sheer genius. And the film does not shy away from showing how truly awful America was to anyone, even its own citizens, who were simply labeled as a communist with no burden of proof. Frankly, I think that's a fire and passion we should bring back in our modern culture towards people who are communists, but maybe I'm a little out of line. And finally, let's talk about Einstein. He isn't in the film much, only a handful of scenes in fact, but Nolan was wise enough to know that if you're going to use Albert freaking Einstein, you make those scenes count. And they are easily the most important scenes of the film. I also appreciate that, much like Oppenheimer himself, this feels like Einstein. Now, I don't know about you, but I think we've gotten so used to the caricature of Einstein that we forget he was a real man. And this film very much puts into perspective that Einstein was just a regular guy. Tom Conti, the man that plays Einstein, had a very difficult job. Play a non-caricature version of Einstein in the most pivotal scenes of the film and make us believe that we're looking at Albert Einstein. And he did it to perfection. The man needs a raise. I can't even say anything bad about this movie, guys. I mean, I kind of want to. I feel like I should. I am a critic. I criticize things every day on YouTube, whether it be movies, video games, our modern culture in general when it comes to society and politics. But I can't find a single negative to this film. It hit every box I wanted it to hit, and then 44 more I didn't even realize I needed. Everything from there being zero CGI in the film, the performances, the moral questions and themes that I can't even begin to dive into in this review, because that is a discussion in and of itself, to the sheer scope of what they fit in a 3-hour movie, I can confidently say this movie is a 10 out of 10. Also, bonus points to anyone that can point out Gary Oldman's role in this, because I did not recognize him at all until I was running for the script for this video. But those are just my opinions. Let me know yours in the comments down below, or let me know on Twitter where you can find me at BoltTheWord. I am a nerdy news channel. I cover nerdy news every day, aside from when I'm doing these random scripted videos that I want to cover that I do about once a month. Either way, it's all here in the nerdosphere, and this has been Words of Paradise.